Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be jumping into the Quran.
Oh, cool.
Now, I know if you've never encountered this book before, it might seem kind of intimidating,
Yeah.
but we're going to make this approachable and even fun.
Right.
And we're going to explore how the Quran offers guidance
Okay.
for Muslims in not just this life, but like what comes after.
Right.
So think of like a roadmap to navigating both worlds.
Yeah, I like that.
So to kind of set the stage, can you give us a little background on the Quran? Like when and where did it originate?
Sure. The Quran originated in 7th century Arabia
Okay.
and is believed by Muslims to be the word of God as revealed to the Prophet Muhammad.
Right.
And it's the foundation of the Muslim faith.
Gotcha. So it sounds like we're dealing with something pretty major here.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Now, how is this book actually structured?
Okay. So the Quran is organized into chapters called surahs, which are then divided into verses called ayahs.
Okay.
And there are 114 surahs in total.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a pretty big book. And these surahs, they're not arranged in chronological order. They're arranged thematically, which kind of makes it interesting because you're jumping around to different topics and themes.
I see. So we're not going to be reading the whole Quran today, are we?
No, definitely not. We're looking at some key excerpts.
Okay, good to know. So from these excerpts, what really stood out to you in terms of how the Quran guides Muslims in their daily lives?
One thing that really stood out to me is the emphasis on ethical and moral conduct.
Okay.
For example, several verses talk about the importance of patience,
Yeah, I noticed that.
especially when you're facing hardship.
Yeah.
Like in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 153, it says, "And seek help through patience and prayer, and indeed it is difficult except for the humbly submissive to Allah."
Humbly submissive to Allah. That sounds like it goes beyond just being patient, right?
Right. It's about recognizing that true strength comes from surrendering to a higher power,
Okay.
acknowledging that we're not in control of everything.
I see.
So this submission, coupled with patience and prayer, forms the bedrock of navigating challenges in life.
It's not just about gritting your teeth and bearing it.
Yeah.
It's about finding strength through faith.
Exactly. And this concept of seeking help through patience and prayer, it resonates even beyond the Muslim community.
Right.
It speaks to a universal human need for support and guidance in times of difficulty.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
What else does the Quran say about how we should act towards others?
Well, there's a strong emphasis on charity
Okay.
and helping those less fortunate. Take Surah Al-Isra, verse 26, for instance, it says, "And give the relative his right, and also the poor and the traveler, and do not spend wastefully."
So it's not just about giving. It's about giving wisely,
Exactly.
making sure those who are truly in need are cared for.
Yes. And this idea of giving, it resonates across cultures and religions. It's a fundamental aspect of human compassion and social responsibility.
Right.
And you find similar teachings in various wisdom traditions throughout history.
That's a universal code of kindness.
Yeah. Yes, woven into the fabric of different faiths and philosophies.
Now, what about those things that we're told to avoid?
Okay.
I noticed a lot of verses condemning arrogance and bragging about wealth.
Yes. The Quran strongly condemns arrogance and boasting about one's possessions. Surah Al-Kahf, verse 38, puts it quite plainly. "And as for the one who turned away and disbelieved and preferred the worldly life over the hereafter, then indeed hellfire will be his refuge."
Whoa, hellfire.
Yeah.
That sounds intense. I'm guessing that leads us into the concept of consequences, both in this life and the next.
Indeed.
Okay, here's where things get really interesting for me. Tell me more about these ideas of heaven and hell.
Okay.
Some of the descriptions in these excerpts are pretty vivid.
They are incredibly vivid, but the Quran isn't just trying to scare people.
Okay.
These depictions underscore the significance of the Day of Judgment,
Right.
a core belief in Islam where all our actions, big or small, will be accounted for.
So it's about emphasizing that our choices matter,
Yes, definitely.
both in the short term and in the grand scheme of things.
Exactly.
So what do these descriptions actually say about what paradise is like?
Okay. So imagine lush gardens with rivers flowing beneath them, beautiful dwellings, companions of exceptional beauty.
Wow, that sounds pretty nice.
It's portrayed as a state of eternal peace and fulfillment, free from any pain or sorrow.
That sounds like a pretty idyllic existence.
Yeah.
What about the other side?
Okay.
What awaits those who don't make it to paradise?
So hellfire is depicted as a terrifying realm of suffering with scorching heat and unbearable torment.
Oh, wow.
The Quran uses very strong imagery to convey the gravity of punishment for those who reject faith and lead a life of transgression.
It seems like the Quran uses these powerful images of reward and punishment to motivate people to live righteously.
Yeah.
Not just out of fear, but for the hope of eternal bliss.
Exactly. It's not just about laying down the law. It's about inspiring a life aligned with virtue and compassion.
Okay. Now I'm curious, based on these excerpts, what does it actually mean to be a good Muslim? What are the key elements that define a righteous life?
So faith is paramount. It's about believing in God, his prophets, and the divine scriptures.
Okay.
But it goes beyond mere belief. It's about actively living that faith through your actions.
So it's not just about saying you believe, but about putting those beliefs into practice.
Right.
What kind of actions are we talking about here?
Good deeds are essential. Charity, kindness, honesty, justice.
Right.
These acts of righteousness are constantly emphasized throughout the Quran.
Okay, so I'm seeing a pattern here.
Yeah.
Be good, do good, be patient, and don't show off.
Exactly.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But I'm also curious about those things specifically prohibited in the Quran, like drinking or gambling.
Right.
Why are those off limits?
These prohibitions are meant to protect individuals and society from harm.
Okay.
The Quran views actions like drinking and gambling as detrimental to one's spiritual and social well-being.
So it's not just about arbitrary rules, but about promoting a healthy and fulfilling lifestyle, both individually and collectively.
Exactly. Exactly. It's about guiding people toward a life that benefits both themselves and those around them. And a key factor here is intention.
Intention.
Yes.
Can you explain that a bit more?
Of course. So the concept of niyyah is central to Islamic ethics.
Okay.
And it means that doing something good just to show off doesn't hold the same weight as doing it out of sincere devotion to God.
Oh, I see.
So your actions must align with your heart
Right.
for them to be truly meaningful.
So it's about the purity of your intentions,
Yes.
the why behind your actions.
Exactly.
It adds a whole new layer of depth to the idea of good deeds.
It does. It emphasizes that true righteousness comes from within.
Okay.
It's about aligning your inner world with your outward actions. And this concept of intention isn't unique to Islam. You'll find similar ideas in various spiritual and philosophical traditions around the world.
Now, I'm wondering, with over 1 billion Muslims worldwide, is everyone on the same page about how to interpret the Quran?
That's a great question.
I imagine there must be some diversity of thought.
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
While the Quran provides the foundation, there's diversity in interpretations and schools of thought within Islam.
Okay.
Different cultures and historical context have shaped how people understand and apply its teachings.
So it's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of deal.
Exactly.
There's room for individual understanding and expression within the framework of the Quran?
Exactly. It's like having a recipe with the same core ingredients, but everyone adds their own personal flair.
Right.
It highlights the dynamism of the Islamic tradition,
Okay.
its ability to adapt and evolve while remaining rooted in its core principles.
So we've talked about how to live a good life,
Yeah.
the concept of consequences in the afterlife.
Yeah.
But the Quran isn't just a rule book, is it?
No.
I noticed some pretty captivating stories woven into the text.
Oh, the stories. They're not just there for entertainment. They
Right.
serve a much deeper purpose.
Okay.
They teach profound lessons and offer insights into the human condition.
Like, for example, what are some of the stories that really stand out to you?
Okay. So the story of the prophet Moses confronting Pharaoh appears in several surahs.
Yeah.
It's a powerful narrative about faith, perseverance, and challenging those in power who abuse their authority.
Wow. That's quite a theme.
It is, it is.
And I imagine these stories, told with such detail and imagery, have a profound impact on readers.
Absolutely. They resonate on an emotional level
Yeah.
and make the lessons more relatable. It's teaching through storytelling, a timeless and powerful method used across cultures and religions.
I noticed another story that really caught my attention. The people who carved homes into mountains,
Yes.
believing they were safe only to face punishment.
Right.
What's the message behind that one?
That's a good one. That story's from Surah Al-Hijr. And it highlights that no matter how secure or powerful we may feel,
Right.
we are ultimately accountable to a higher power.
Okay.
It's a cautionary tale against arrogance and placing our trust solely in material possessions or worldly achievements.
So it's a reminder of humility,
Exactly.
acknowledging that there are forces beyond our control.
Yes.
It seems like the Quran is filled with these insightful stories that offer guidance for navigating the complexities of life.
It is. And these stories have been passed down for generations, shaping the Muslim understanding of faith, morality, and the human experience.
Even though we're only scratching the surface, this has been fascinating.
Yeah, it's been fun.
I can already see the depth and richness of these excerpts alone.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. It's just a glimpse, but hopefully it's piqued your curiosity
It definitely has.
and opened a window into a rich tradition with valuable insights into human nature, purpose, and the meaning of life.
For someone like me, just beginning to explore the Quran, what's the one key takeaway you'd want me to leave with?
I would say the emphasis on justice and social responsibility.
Okay.
The Quran consistently stresses the importance of caring for the vulnerable, being honest in your dealings, and standing up for what's right.
Right.
These are universal values that transcend religious boundaries and speak to the core of our shared humanity.
It's incredible how these ancient verses speak to contemporary issues and challenges.
They
It
do.
makes you wonder, what would the Quran have to say about current events or concerns that are relevant to my life today?
That's a great question to ponder.
It is.
It encourages you to apply what you've learned and consider the Quran's perspective on the world around you.
Exactly. And this is just the beginning.
Yes, it is.
There's a whole universe within this book waiting to be explored.
Definitely.
This could be the first step on a much longer journey of discovery.
Absolutely. It's an invitation to delve deeper, to engage with different interpretations, and to continue learning and growing through your exploration of the Quran.
We're just getting started on our deep dive into the Quran. Stay tuned for more fascinating insights.
Welcome back. We've only just begun to scratch the surface of the Quran, and there's so much more to uncover.
I'm ready for more.
Great.
You know, going through these excerpts, what really struck me is how the Quran seems to understand, human nature so well.
Yeah.
All our, flaws and struggles.
It's true, and what's fascinating is that it doesn't condemn us for those flaws. There's this sense of compassion,
Right.
like an acknowledgement that we're not perfect,
Right.
but we're always capable of striving for better. Like, take, for example, Surah Al-Ankabut, verse 20. It says, "Say, O Muhammad, travel through the land and observe how he began creation. Then Allah will produce the final creation. Indeed, Allah, over all things, is competent."
It's like a reminder that even when we stumble,
Yeah.
we have the opportunity to, turn back,
Yeah.
seek guidance, and, make amends.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that ties into the whole concept of repentance, which I saw mentioned a few times.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Repentance and seeking forgiveness are central themes in the Quran,
Okay.
and it's a path open to everyone, regardless of their past mistakes.
Right.
The Quran emphasizes that God is merciful and forgiving, always willing to accept those who sincerely turn back to him.
So it means we're not defined by our mistakes, but by our willingness to learn and grow from them.
Exactly.
Now, I'm curious, what about this idea of free will? Does the Quran say anything about that?
Oh, that's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
It raises the whole destiny versus choice debate.
Right.
So while the Quran acknowledges that God has knowledge of all things, including our future actions,
Okay.
it also emphasizes that we have the freedom to choose our own path.
So it's not like our lives are predetermined
No.
and we're
but
just going through the motions.
Not at all. We have the power to make decisions,
Right.
and we are held accountable for those choices.
Yeah.
So the Quran really emphasizes this balance between divine will and human agency.
Our choices have consequences, both in this life and the next.
Which brings us right back to that idea of accountability
Yeah.
and the day of judgment.
Yeah.
It seems like a lot of these concepts we've been discussing,
Right.
moral conduct, consequences, the afterlife,
Right.
it all connects back to this pivotal event.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the concept of free will is directly tied to the day of judgment.
Yeah.
We're responsible for our actions, good and bad, and ultimately, we will be judged accordingly.
Like this cosmic balancing of the scales.
Yes, exactly.
Now, it's interesting, all these pieces that we've been talking about,
Yeah.
the life lessons, the concept of the afterlife, the stories,
Yeah.
they all seem to, fit together.
They do. The Quran offers a really comprehensive framework
Okay.
for understanding life and purpose and our place in the universe. It's
I
not just about spirituality. It
Yeah.
touches upon, social interactions, personal conduct, even our relationship with the natural world.
Yeah, it's like a guidebook for navigating all aspects of human existence.
Exactly, exactly. The Quran offers guidance on everything from prayer and charity to marriage and family to trade and commerce.
Wow.
It's meant to be a holistic blueprint for living a meaningful and ethical life.
I have to admit, before this deep dive, I had a lot of misconceptions about the Quran.
It's understandable.
I think, the way it's sometimes portrayed in the media can be very, misleading.
Yeah, a lot of people have those misconceptions. It's often presented in a very narrow, sometimes even distorted way. But what you're seeing here in these excerpts is a much more nuanced and complex picture.
It's definitely challenging my preconceived notions. What's really resonating with me is the emphasis on ethical conduct, social responsibility,
Yeah.
and striving for a just world.
Yeah.
Those are values that speak to people of all backgrounds.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what makes the Quran so relevant.
Yeah.
Its message transcends time and place, speaking to fundamental human values that are shared across cultures and religions.
Now let's talk about something you mentioned earlier, the diversity of interpretations within Islam. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. While Muslims agree on the Quran's fundamental principles,
Okay.
there are different schools of thought and legal traditions that have emerged over time.
I see.
And these schools have developed nuanced interpretations of the Quranic verses, leading to variations in practice and belief.
So it's like different branches of the same tree, each growing in its own direction, but still connected to the same roots.
That's a great analogy. They share a common origin, but have branched out, each with its own approach to understanding and applying the Quran's teachings.
But with all this diversity, are there clashes?
Not necessarily.
Right.
There's a rich tradition of scholarly debate
Okay.
and respectful dialogue within Islam. Different perspectives are acknowledged and discussed, and ultimately, individuals are encouraged to follow the interpretation that resonates most with them.
So it's about finding your own path within the broader framework of Islamic teachings. That seems pretty open-minded and flexible for a religion that's often portrayed as rigid.
It is, and it speaks to the dynamism and adaptability of Islam. It allows for both unity and diversity within the faith, recognizing that individual understanding and application can vary while still adhering to those core principles.
Okay, I've got another question for you.
Sure.
In these excerpts, we see a lot about prophets like Moses, Abraham, even Jesus.
Yeah.
What's their significance in Islam?
Oh, great question. In Islam, all these figures are considered prophets of God,
Okay.
sent to guide humanity toward truth and righteousness. They are deeply revered, and their stories are seen as sources of inspiration and wisdom.
So it's like a lineage of messengers, each building upon the message of the one before leading up to Muhammad.
Exactly. Muslims believe that Muhammad is the final prophet in this long line, completing the revelation that began with Adam.
I see.
And they see the Quran as the final and most complete revelation from God.
And it's interesting how these earlier prophets and their stories are woven into the Quran's narrative.
They are. They serve as reminders of God's consistent message throughout history.
Okay.
These stories highlight those universal values of faith, submission to a higher power, and striving for a just and compassionate world.
I'm noticing how much the Quran emphasizes this idea of one God.
Yes,
It seems very central.
it is. That's the core principle of Islam.
Okay.
Tawhid, the oneness of God, is the foundation upon which everything else is built.
Okay.
The Quran rejects any form of idolatry or polytheism,
Right.
emphasizing that God is unique and without equal.
So it's a very clear and straightforward belief
Very much so.
in one God without any ambiguity.
It is, and this belief has profound implications for the Muslim worldview, shaping their understanding of creation, purpose, and their relationship with the divine.
As we're talking, I'm realizing that the Quran tackles some pretty deep philosophical questions.
It does.
Like, where do we come from? What's our purpose? What happens after we die?
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. The Quran addresses these fundamental questions and offers answers that have resonated with people for centuries.
So what does the Quran say about our purpose in life?
Well, it's all about recognizing and submitting to the will of God
Okay.
Our purpose is to live a life of worship, obedience, and striving for righteousness.
Okay.
It's not just about following rules, but about cultivating a deep and meaningful relationship with God.
It sounds like it's about like aligning your actions with your faith, like seeking a connection with the divine through
Right.
your deeds and intentions.
Exactly, exactly. And through this relationship with God, Muslims believe that you find true fulfillment and purpose in life. It's a journey of self-discovery and spiritual growth, guided by the teachings of the Quran and the example of the Prophet Muhammad.
Wow, there's so much depth to unpack here.
Yeah.
It's a lot to absorb, but I'm really starting to see like the complexity and richness of the Quran.
It's true. And remember, we're only looking at a small selection of verses. Imagine the vast universe of knowledge and wisdom waiting to be explored within the full text.
It makes me want to like keep digging deeper, which is exactly what these deep dives are for,
Exactly.
to spark that curiosity and encourage further exploration.
It's about opening minds, fostering understanding, and inviting listeners to engage with these ideas in a meaningful way,
Yeah,
and hopefully have a little fun along the way.
absolutely. Who knew learning about the Quran could be so fascinating and thought-provoking?
It's a testament to the enduring power of these ancient teachings
Yeah.
to spark curiosity and challenge our perspectives.
Okay, before we wrap up this part,
Sure.
there's one concept I'd like to touch on that I feel like, often gets misconstrued. This idea of jihad.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Sure.
It's a term that's unfortunately been distorted and misused, leading to many misconceptions.
Yeah.
So the word jihad literally means struggle or effort,
Okay.
and it has a much broader meaning in Islam than just warfare.
So it's not just about armed conflict,
No.
as it's often portrayed in the media.
No, not at all. The Quran actually emphasizes that the greatest jihad is the struggle against one's own ego and desires.
Oh, wow.
It's about striving for self-improvement, resisting temptation, and living a virtuous life,
Yeah.
Conquering your inner demons, so to speak.
So it's more about like an internal battle than an external one.
Exactly, exactly.
But the Quran does allow for armed conflict in certain circumstances, right?
It does, but only as a last resort and under very specific conditions.
Okay.
So the Quran permits armed conflict and self-defense to protect the oppressed or to defend religious freedom.
Okay.
But even in war, the Quran prohibits acts of cruelty, targeting civilians, or destroying property.
So it's about fighting for justice and protecting the vulnerable, not aggression or conquest.
Exactly. There are very clear ethical guidelines that must be adhered to.
It seems like there's a lot more nuance to this concept of jihad
Yes.
than most people realize. It's definitely not a simple, like, black and white issue.
No, it's complex and multifaceted, and it shouldn't be oversimplified or reduced to a single definition. It's important to understand the historical context, the various interpretations, and the Quran's overall emphasis on peace, justice, and compassion.
Well said. I think this highlights the importance of approaching any religious text with an open mind
Yes.
and a willingness to understand its complexities.
Absolutely. It's about engaging with these ideas thoughtfully and critically, rather than relying on stereotypes or preconceived notions.
This deep dive has really been eye-opening. I'm learning so much about the Quran, its teachings, and its impact on the lives of millions.
And we're not done yet. There are still more fascinating aspects of the Quran to explore.
I can't wait. Stay with us as we continue our journey into the heart of the Quran.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the Quran. As we've been talking, I've been struck by the sheer scope of this book.
Yeah,
It covers everything from everyday ethics to profound philosophical questions.
it really does. But there's one aspect we haven't touched on yet that I find particularly intriguing.
Yeah.
This whole idea of unseen worlds.
Oh, yeah, those are always fascinating.
Right.
The Quran speaks about these realms beyond our perception, populated by beings like jinns and angels.
Okay, hold on, jinns. Are we talking like genies in a bottle kind of creatures? 'Cause that's what comes to mind for me.
Not exactly. While there are some similarities in folklore, the Quranic concept of jinns is a bit more nuanced.
Yeah.
They're described as beings created from smokeless fire, capable of both good and evil,
Wow.
and accountable to God just like humans.
So it's like there's this whole other dimension coexisting with ours, full of beings we can't even perceive.
It really is. It speaks to the vastness of creation and the limitations of our human senses.
It definitely challenges our perception of reality.
Yeah.
And what about angels? I feel like they're mentioned quite a lot in the excerpts we've been looking at.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Angels are often described as messengers of God carrying out his commands, conveying his revelations. They're also seen as protectors and guides for believers,
Oh, wait.
offering a sense of comfort and support in times of need.
It's like having a whole team of invisible helpers cheering us on.
Exactly.
Now, I can't talk about angels without mentioning the other side of the coin, Satan.
Of course, the Quran speaks of Satan or Iblis as a jinn who rebelled against God.
Right.
And he represents temptation and evil, constantly seeking to lead humans astray.
So it's like this epic cosmic battle between good and evil is playing out all around us, even if we're not aware of it.
It's a really powerful metaphor for the internal struggles we all face.
Yeah.
The choices between, our better impulses and our more selfish desires.
Right.
The Quran reminds us that we're not alone in these struggles.
Right.
That there are both forces of good and evil vying for our attention.
Okay, I need to lighten the mood a bit after all that.
Sure.
I got to ask about some of the more, shall we say, unusual details I found in these excerpts.
Okay.
For example, there's a verse about the sky being like a protected roof.
Oh.
Does that mean there's a literal ceiling up there?
You've hit on one of those passages that often spark curiosity.
Right.
The Quran frequently uses vivid imagery from the natural world to convey profound spiritual truths. So in this case, the protected roof of the sky represents God's care and protection over creation.
Okay, that makes more sense. I was picturing like a giant dome over the earth.
I can see that.
I also came across a passage describing mountains as like pegs holding the earth steady.
Mm-hmm.
Are mountains literally like giant nails pinning the planet together?
Again, it's a metaphorical description.
Okay.
The mountains, with their deep roots and immense size, symbolize stability and strength.
Right.
The Quran uses this imagery to highlight the firm foundations upon which God has created the world.
It's fascinating how these everyday objects take on deeper meaning when viewed through the lens of the Quran.
It really is. It encourages us to see the world with new eyes, to appreciate the signs of God's power and wisdom in every aspect of creation.
All right, last one, and this one really got me thinking. There's a verse that says God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days.
Okay.
Does that mean time works differently for God?
That's a question that has puzzled theologians for centuries.
That's right.
The Quran doesn't explicitly define the length of these days.
Okay.
Some scholars interpret them literally as 24-hour periods.
Right.
While others believe they represent vast epochs of time, perhaps even billions of years.
It's one of those mysteries we might never fully unravel.
Perhaps. But I
Yeah.
think that's part of what makes engaging with these sacred texts so compelling.
Yeah.
They invite us to grapple with concepts that lie beyond our full comprehension,
Right.
to ponder those big questions and to embrace the unknown.
And sometimes it's okay to just sit with the mystery and appreciate the wonder of it all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes the most profound truths lie in that space between knowing and not knowing.
Well said.
Oh?
I gotta say, this deep dive has completely changed my perspective on the Quran.
Oh, that's great.
It's far more complex, insightful, and even entertaining than I ever imagined.
It's been a pleasure sharing these insights with you. I hope it inspires you to continue exploring the Quran for yourself
Yeah, me too.
and discovering its richness and depth.
Who knows what other gems are waiting to be uncovered within his pages. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey into the heart of the Quran. Until next time, keep diving deeper.